Hello BookTube, this is Tag Tuesday. For this Tag Tuesday, I will be doing the War and Peace book tag. This tag is the translation of Kuragins, etc., and I've linked to his channel in the show notes down below. Now, before I begin, I will admit I have never read War and Peace. It is one of those books that I'm not entirely sure I ever plan on reading, but I can still do the tag, so I will. Question number 1. Pierre Bezukhov. A book that came to you by chance and unexpectedly became one of your favorites. So this prompt is a bit tough on two fronts. One is that how I buy my books leaves very little room for chance. I have not gone in-person book shopping in a very long time. All of my book buying has been online, since the pandemic, and it was quite heavily online before then as well. However, there is a book that matches this prompt, but it's not one of my favorites. And there's a whole video I can make, and I might make one of these days, about my favorites, or what necessarily constitutes a favorite. So the book I'm talking about that matches this prompt, except for it's not one of my favorites, is Sea People by Christina Thompson. So I initially encountered this book from a local library and passed it by. It really wasn't a book that I was interested in reading at the time. However, in 2020, I was one of the initial judges for the nonfiction side of the BookTube Prize. And as luck would have it, Sea People by Christina Thompson was one of the books in my group. So I had to read it. And I quite liked it. It was quite good. It was number 3, I think. And I recently reread it, and it's still pretty good. I quite liked it. Sea People is a history of the, I guess you could say it's a history of the anthropology of the Polynesians. More so than a history of the Polynesians themselves. But, I mean, again, I like it. But, to be honest, I don't necessarily like it enough to ultimately want to keep it. In fact, it is one of the 190 books I am planning on removing from my library at some point. How that happens, still not entirely sure how that's going to happen. Prompt number 2, Natasha Rostova. A book with a bad start that through the reading it became one of your favorites. Again, I'm not entirely sure this would count as one of my favorites because I've only, well, there's a temptation with this tag to go in a completely nonfiction in history way. But I think I'm going to resist it, and I will actually pick one of my favorites for this prompt, even though I have not read it in a very long time, at least 5 or 6 years, if not more. And that is The Scar by China Mieville. So it's not uncommon for me to bail early on a book. It just, something's not working for me, something's ticking me off, I'm just not clicking with it, but I will come back to it maybe a few months later, maybe a year or so later, and whatever it was, whatever that blockage was at the beginning, is gone, and I can really get into that book. And I think the best example of that is The Scar. The Scar is the second of the Boss Log trilogy. It's a story of a linguist named Belis Coldwine who is fleeing the city of New Krubuzon after her ex-lover caused some shit to go down, and so she's fleeing to the colonies. However, her ship is taken by pirates who are members of the floating pirate city called Armada. Belis is recruited to become part of a project in which one of the leaders, or one part of the leadership of Armada, are trying to summon an otherworldly beast in order to move the ship much faster than it would ordinarily go, because they're looking for something. However, Belis just wants to go back home, and that gets her into further trouble. So even though I haven't read The Scar in a very long time, I think this book would count. Another book would count would be Iran, A Modern History by Abbas Amanat, which, I mean, it's a history of Iran from the 16th century through to the present. And I initially bailed on it because the introduction was quite rough, and initially it was quite slow going on my first attempt to read it. But a second attempt about a year later, I liked it quite a lot. I don't know necessarily if it would be a favorite, because I've only actually read it the once. I'm fairly sure I've read The Scar at least twice. Prompt number 3. Andrei Bolkonski. A book that plunged into despair. I'm assuming that plunged you into despair. I don't really have books like that. Or I don't really react to books in that way. I'm not a terribly emotional reader. So this prompt doesn't quite work for me. Prompt number 4, Marya Bolkonski. The book that you gifted or recommended the most. So I think in this case, I'm going to go with a book that I have actually reviewed. So last year and a bit of the year before, so in 2021 and 2022 and 2023, I don't think I started in 2021. I think it was 2022. In 2020 and into 2020. No? I think it was 2022 and 2023. Could have also been 2021, but I don't know for sure. But in those years, I was occasionally a reviewer for Open Letters Monthly, specializing in ancient Near Eastern and ancient Egyptian history. And one of the books that I enjoyed the most, and that I reviewed for Open Letters, was Weaver, Scraps, and Kings by Amanda H. Podany. So hopefully that one was widely read, and hopefully a lot of people picked it up based on that review, or at least some people did. Prompt number 5, Nikolai Rostov. A character that you loved and hated at the same time. I did not actually catch this one when I went through this prompt. let's see here. Is there a character I love and hate at the same time? Well, I don't know necessarily about fictional characters, but I think going back to a historical figure, it would certainly be Alexander the Great. There's just something compelling about him, and yet also repellent about him as well. And I think maybe in a way you could say Paul Atreides from Dune, because on one hand he is quite heroic and is sort of in that traditional heroic sort of narrative, but at the same time he is an absolute monster. So I guess maybe there's that sort of love-hate sort of reaction to him. Prompt number 6, Mikhail Kutuzov. An unpopular book that you love. Again, I'm not entirely sure love is quite the right term to use, but I'm going to go with Post-Wall, Post-Square by Christina Spohr. It's a history of the final years of the Cold War, focusing on East Germany, Hungary, Poland, and China. So the book starts with the sort of fall of the Eastern European communist regimes and the fall of the Berlin Wall, and eventually German unification, through to the Tiananmen Square protests and the crackdown on that, and also the collapse of the Soviet Union. I really enjoyed the book when I read it in 2020, and I recommended it for the 2021 BookTube Prize nonfiction side, and was told that as far as Robert could tell, Robert Sheard is the administrator of the BookTube Prize, that that not many outlets had reviewed it, and that it would probably not advance because nobody had heard of it. So I'll go with that one. Prompt number 7, Boris Drubetskoy. A book with a social ascent. So for this, there's two ways to interpret this. I think there's a book in which a character sort of socially ascends, or it could be a social aspect. But I think I'm going to go with the social ascent and go back to fiction. So there's a novel series called The War for the Rose Throne, which was initially a duology, and I think ended up being a quartet. And it's a story of a criminal named Thomas Piety, who was your average gang boss, who was drafted into war, and during the war became a priest and returned home to a city of Ellenberg with both his squadron as well as his brothers. And he basically, once he returned to Ellenberg, converted these platoons or squadrons to the new nucleus for his gang called the Pious Men. And over the first book, Priest of Bones, he retakes his streets and becomes effectively the most powerful gang boss in Ellenberg. And in the second book, he eventually rises to the position of, at least for a temporary moment, mayor of the city or governor of the city. And his social ascent is furthered because of his rise in wealth and also his political status. He is actually an operative for the intelligence services called the Queensmen. And eventually he sort of, I think by the third book, he's effectively nobility. I think. It's been a while since I've read the books, and I also kind of largely gave up on them. So, anyway, so I'll go with that. Prompt number 8. The Kuragins. A disappointing book with a beautiful cover. This one's tough because there are so many options. Let's see here. I want to stick with fiction for that. No. Oh, yes. The space opera by Catherine Valenti. It's got a very effective, interesting cover that the book stinks. I don't know, it's a really beautiful cover though. Oh. I am drawing a blank right now, I'm sorry. Prompt number 9. Anna Pavlovna, a gossipy book. So for this prompt, I'm going to go with The Swimming Pool Library by Alan Hollinghurst. The Swimming Pool Library is a 1980s gay novel about a young man who, basically, in order to avoid death duties, his grandfather has settled his estate on his young grandchildren. And the main character basically gets involved with an older gay aristocrat. And during these two characters' meetings, which sort of serves as an education for what gay life was like in Britain before the main character was born or during his youth. And the conversations between the two of them are quite gossipy, as well as the conversations between the various characters in general. So I'll go with that. Prompt number 10, Dolohov, favorite villain. So for this, I'm going to go with Sasuke Uchiha, or Uchiha Sasuke, from Naruto by Masashi Kishimoto. So Naruto is one of the most popular manga series ever. It's the story of a young man named Naruto Uzumaki who, on the day of his birth, a nine-tailed fox, a giant nine-tailed fox, attacked his village of Konohagakure. And in order to defeat the fox, the Hokage at the time, or the leader of the village, sealed the fox into infant Naruto. And this resulted in Naruto becoming the town pariah. And he compensated for this by becoming a trickster, a prankster, the class clown. And he aspires to become Hokage himself, so that the village will have to acknowledge him. When Naruto graduates from the ninja academy into becoming an apprentice ninja, he is joined in a 3-person cell with his crush Sakura Haruno and his rival Sasuke Uchiha, who is in many ways a boy like Naruto. Sasuke Uchiha comes from the Uchiha clan, which is one of the most prominent clans in the village. However, a few years before the series begins, the Uchiha clan was massacred by Sasuke's older brother, Itachi. And Sasuke discovered the slaughter, and before Itachi fled the village, he tortured his younger brother by showing him illusions of the slaughter. And this took place over several hours. And this torture led to Sasuke being seriously screwed up and determined to revenge himself on Itachi. And in order to do this, Sasuke makes a series of terrible decisions throughout much of Naruto. Now, the thing about Naruto is that he has a natural empathy. Very often, Naruto can use his own experiences to reach out to opponents who are like him and talk them down, talk them through their problems, and really sort of help them become better people. And you see this with Zabuza and the Wave Arc, Neji and Gaara in the Chunin Exams arc, Kabuto through much of the series, even though initially that talking to was resulted in rather more toxic changes before Kabuto kind of got over it. But Sasuke is the one who Naruto could never really reach. It isn't until the end that Naruto could reach Sasuke and really reform him. And so throughout much of the series, really the relationship between Naruto and Sasuke is what is focused on. And particularly in the later part of the series, Naruto trying to bring Sasuke home, which, while in a way, I mean, it's a prominent storyline and really the overarching storyline of the series, it sort of in a way takes a bit of a backseat to many of the sort of more immediate arcs that compose the series. But I think ultimately how things work out, Sasuke is the true main antagonist of Naruto, even if he is not as evil or as much of a traditional big bad as, say, Madara or Kaguya or Orochimaru or Nagato. So, yeah, I think so. Sasuke is definitely my favorite villain because he is quite compelling, particularly once you think of Sasuke in this light. He is a much more compelling character than if you think of him as just the deuteragonist or the rival. Anyway, prompt 11, Platoon Karataev, a book that made you reconsider your life or a specific aspect of it. So, again, this kind of question usually throws me for a loop because, I mean, books really don't do this for me. I mean, I read them mostly for entertainment, so books really don't radically change my life. But I think, in a way, you can make a case for Fairy Tail by Hiro Mishima. So I'm going to end this tag with 2 manga series. So Fairy Tail is a manga series about a guild of wizards called Fairy Tail, who are infamous in the Kingdom of Fiore for being rather destructive when they do their missions. And no Fairy Tail wizard is as destructive as Natsu Dragneel. Natsu is the center of a team that forms throughout Fairy Tail that features his Exceed companion Happy, a young wizard named Lucy, who Natsu meets in the beginning of the series, and in a lot of ways she's certainly it's like main protagonist, deuteragonist, but Lucy's also, in a way, the narrator. and also Gray, who's Natsu's rival, and Urza, who's the most powerful or strongest female wizard in the guild, and eventually Wendy and her exceed companion Carla. So Fairy Tail has been for a long time one of my favorite manga series. And in 2020, while I was undergoing a taste change, and I've talked a bit about that a few weeks ago, I made a video in which I talked about my reading history. And when I got to sort of what happened post-pandemic, or during the pandemic and post-pandemic, I had thought for the longest time that my reading had shifted from being primarily focused towards science fiction and fantasy, which for nearly 20 years was my favorite genre of literature, to history, which became the dominant thing that I wanted to read, that I was most interested in, that I was most passionate in. But in a way, I've been thinking about it since I made that video, that maybe in a way, I don't know if history actually was as dominant as I have thought it was. Because, I mean, as much as I have built over those going on 5 years, a large history collection, I'm also, when I go look at my manga collection, I have built in that from complete scratch over the same amount of time, actually even less time. I've built an as large, if not larger, manga collection. So in a way, this reading period has been as much manga as it has been history. Although if you also want to bring in history into this as well, I think the work of history that really sort of ignited my love of history, which has in a way faded over the last few months, would be Big Wonderful Thing, A History of Texas by Stephen Harrigan, which is a hilarious history of the U.S. state of Texas. So let's see how long I have been going on. Oh, I've been going on for almost 30 minutes. So I'm going to wrap it up from here because I do have a book haul to get to. And if you would like to do this tag, consider yourselves tagged. I haven't really seen many people do this tag, but I would like to echo Grix and tag Alan of Big Hard Books and Classics, because he specifically asked me to tag him in tag video, so I will tag him. So I will be right back with the book haul. So until then, thank you, BookTube. Have a great afternoon and stay safe.